stuff. But yeah, well, how about Brewsters Millions with John Candy?
That is the worst. You know, it's a remake, right? It's a remake of an older film, but
yeah.
That is one of the worst things. I remember having to review that back in college, and it was so depressing because I do believe that that's the movie that in some ways kind of ruined Walter Hill's career as a director. I mean, it never really felt like he came back after that. But it is so painfully unfunny. And I mean, that's really saying something when you've got both Richard Pryor and John Candy in the same movie. But it's another one of those terrible Richard Pryor vehicles from the 80s that just died. I mean, there were some good ones, you know, like Some Kind of Hero and a few others, but
Bustin' Loose, yeah.
Bustin' Loose is okay.
Oh yeah,
you know, like as a dumb, you know, Saturday afternoon movie.
Right.
But you know, generally they were unwatchable, and this one is definitely one of those.
Did Walter Hill also do The Toy?
No, that was Richard Donner.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Richard
right.
Donner, right.
That's right.
Yeah, but that was another one that was unwatchable.
Well,
we're all fallible.
Yeah,
that's true.
I guess.
Well, Walter Hill's been around on all the a lot of the podcasts promoting his new film, which incidentally also came out this month, The Assignment, with Sigourney Weaver and Michelle Rodriguez, which is getting pretty positive word of mouth. I have not gotten around to looking at it yet, but he's been promoting that. He has some interesting things to say about Brewsters Millions, and I think some of the failure of that could probably be attributed to Richard Pryor. I just don't think
that's the impression I got from the
right.
Bret Easton Ellis podcast, that he really sort of leaned into that theory, Richard Pryor. So, I mean, that's the thing that struck me about Brewsters Millions is how unfunny it was.
Yeah,
that's the thing that Dean, you're absolutely right. It's just that's the thing that really gets you. You have those two, and the movie's are done. I mean,
and there's no worse feeling than just, you know, it's like I can't stand that feeling of like, I don't go to comedy shows very often because like live comedy, because I hate that feeling of being in a room where someone's trying to be funny and they're not, and just. It doesn't matter if the audience is laughing. If the audience is laughing, it's almost even worse because you're like, this is so funny. Why are you unfunny? Why are you laughing? And then, you know, of course, if nobody's laughing, it's even more uncomfortable. And that's the feeling that Brewsters Millions gives me. Is that, God, get me out of here.
Yeah, it's you know, I think John Candy was giving it his all from what I get from Walter Hill's take on it. He said John Candy was giving it his all, and he just came in with a can-do attitude, but Richard Pryor just wasn't really feeling it, and I think that the film suffers because of it. But speaking of Walter Hill, I did mention The Assignment, which is out this month as well, and we're going to get to this later, but I'll go ahead and take care of it now. Shout Factory, on their Shout Selects label, has released Streets of Fire as a 2-disc special edition with lots of bonus features. There's a documentary. There's 5 vintage featurettes. There's all the music videos of the songs from the film. Of course, the most notable one is I Can Dream About You by Dan Hartman, which became top 10 in summer of '84. And there's a new 2K scan of the Inner Positive. So if you're a fan of Walter Hill's Streets of Fire, there you go.
Now that one I like. that one I enjoy still. I like the music, you know, that Jim Steinman music that's in it. Like with Tonight's What It Means to Be Young or something like that. Is that what it's called?
I think so, yeah.
There's a lot of good music in it. It's flawed, I know, but that cast is pretty good. I mean, I'm not a big Michael Pare fan, but he looks good here, and of course Diane Lane is fantastic to look at. And
we got to give it to Diane Lane. We were talking about her last week with Paris and Wayne. I mean, to be in the business this long and still be this good. I mean,
yes.
that to me is right there is worth every accolade. To be that good in Streets of Fire, and then to be that good in 40, I guess, like is it like at least well over 30 years later, is incredible. I mean, my hat is off to her. I mean, and to constantly reinvent yourself too, which she's had to do. I mean,
she's pretty fearless about that, I think, and she's somebody I feel like will wait around for a role. Will not. It doesn't feel like she'll do just anything. But I like that she was one of the people that kind of early on dipped her feet into the indie waters with things like a walk to the moon and things like that. So, but I mean, she's great. She's one of my first screen crushes, to tell you the truth. Ever since A Little Romance, I've been in love with Diane Lane.
Oh yeah.
But
and she looks great in Rumblefish that came out last month. I noticed how striking she was in that film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
so,
and in The Outsiders and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But also we should mention the cast of Streets of Fire includes let's see, Robert Townsend is in it.
Yes.
Then we've got Amy Madigan, right? She's fantastic in it. Rick Moranis and Willem Dafoe is fantastic as the villain. So I mean, it's got really, really good design to it. It's got a really sort of like a quasi-futuristic, quasi-nostalgic kind of design to it. That's kind of unusual, and it's got its problems, but I like it.
Oh yeah, it's a very original film.
Two thoughts just occurred to me. One, because we're talking about Willem Dafoe and like a musical, I think he'd be great as the MC in a production of Cabaret. I'd like to see that.
That would be good.
That would be kind of neat, wouldn't it? And second thing, the only thing I remember about Streets of Fire, because I don't even know if I've ever seen it, but I did turn it on cable one time, and it was on, and there's a conversation between Michael Pare and Diane Lane on a staircase, and so it cuts to her, then it cuts to him, and they go back and forth. Every single time they cut to Michael Pare, his hair is different. And I mean, it's uncanny. Out of 5 separate shots, he has like 5 different hair lengths or styles, or his hair's on his face and then it's not, and that's the only thing that stuck with me about that movie is the bad continuity at that scene.
I remember thinking the same thing about Year of the Dragon.
Everyone did. Mickey Rourke's hair, I mean, just changes every fucking scene. I mean,
it's one of the worst things about the movie. It's just so distracting, Anyway.
But I will say about Streets of Fire is it's wonderfully photographed by Andrew Laszlo, who photographed most of Walter Hill's the seminal movies in his the early part of his career. He's the same guy who photographed Warriors and Southern Comfort and The Driver. So, or not The Driver. I don't think he did The Driver, but anyway, he did a lot of those early Walter Hill films. So it's.
Do you do Long Riders too?
I believe he did, yes. Which is coming out, by the way, in August. They're doing a reissue on that, but that's coming down the pike. But anyway, it looks like a Walter Hill, a time for a reevaluation of Walter Hill, because all these Walter Hill titles are coming out. So
good.
He did some stuff after, though, Brewsters Millions, that's worthwhile. I mean, Extreme Prejudice, to a lesser extent, Red Heat. I mean, when we get into the 90s, we get into, I mean...
Another 48 hours.
That's the problem. When we get into another 48 hours, which is supposed to save everyone's career...
Wild Bill. Wild Bill in '96, I think.
That's not a bad movie.
That's a good movie.
It's not a bad movie. And then you have the actual version of Yojimbo, based on the Dashiell Hammett story, Red Harvest, Last Man Standing, which just doesn't work.
Right. Some people have good things to say about it. I've read occasionally.
I think Christopher Walken's good in it. He was the villain, right? He played the.
It's
not a great movie.
I've never
seen
it.
It's not a bad movie. It's just kind of like, don't mess with the original. Kind of like it works so well in the samurai thing. But I got to give him points for trying, though. I can't fault him for that. I mean, if I was going to say if Walter Hill in this century, what do we have? Bullet in the Head and The Assignment, I guess, right? Those are.
Yeah, I mean, there's, there was that terrible sci-fi movie, Supernova. Which
that was a dud. Yeah, that's a bad one.
Which he put another name on. He didn't
always
even
a sign
put his
of
name
greatness.
on it. But for me, I guess Wild Bill is the last movie of his that I really thought was of note. I mean, I have problems with Extreme Prejudice. But I just do feel like Brewsters Millions is the demarcation line because up until that point, with the amazing procession of the Warriors and Long Riders, Southern Comfort, 48 Hours, and Streets of Fire, that's an amazing line of movies. And then you just feel like Brewsters Millions steps in there and ruins the whole party for everybody. So, but that's 5 good movies is not bad. I do have some love for like things like Johnny Handsome and.
Let's not forget Johnny Handsome. That's the one. Yeah, I mean you can't forget that.
And Trespass wasn't bad for just sort of trashy, waste your time watching.
Right.
Pacino was doing Johnny Handsome for a long time. He said it was the best part he ever read, but they ultimately gave it to Mickey Rourke. I remember Johnny Handsome. He was. I had film nerds in high school, which they're few and far between that truly knew their stuff, like I did. But I do remember there being some of them that were gung-ho on Walter Hill. Walter Hill was the best maker of kind of muscular man movies.
Yeah. It's true. That's absolutely what he was, and still is to a certain extent. So
he is. Yeah. Yep. Agreed.